Hello, everyone. This is Keegan, Essential Salts. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about this video from the School of Life called Nietzsche. That's all it's called. And, I saw this video many years ago, I think around the time when it came out. And I remember it kind of bothered me, but didn't really remember too much else about it. So I wanted to do a video reacting to something. And all I could remember is that they listed out four things. I remember two of them, and the whole vibe of it was just totally off. So anyway, let's get into this, talk about where it's wrong. Is it playing?
The challenge begins with how to pronounce his name. The first bit should sound like ni, the second like cha, Nietzsche. Then we need to get past some of his extraordinary and provocative statements. What doesn't kill me makes me stronger. God is dead, and we have killed him. And his large moustache. But when we do, we'll discover a thinker who's intermittently enchanting, wise, and very helpful. Friedrich Nietzsche was born in 1844 in a quiet village in the eastern part of Germany, where his father was the priest. He did exceptionally well at school and university, and so excelled at ancient Greek that he was made a professor at the University of Basel when still only in his mid-20s. But his official career didn't work out. He got fed up with his fellow academics, gave up his job, and moved to Sils Maria in the Swiss Alps, where he lived.
Okay. It's kind of a minor point, but I'm wondering why they didn't bring up that he had a medical condition. I mean, sometimes when people talk about Nietzsche's life, they just completely ignore, you would never even know that he had some sort of physiological condition, but he did. He was dealing with headaches, severe migraines from the time he was a child, nausea, vomiting, stomach problems. And what do they say? They just say he got fed up with his colleagues. He got fed up with his fellow academics. I don't even know if that's really true, actually. Yeah, he criticized scholars a lot, but from everything I've read, the main thing is that he was, because in addition to the headaches, his vision was failing him. We don't know exactly what was wrong with Nietzsche. Maybe it was a tumor behind his right eye. Maybe it was some sort of congenital disease. Maybe the same thing that took out his father. There's some Dutch scientists, I think it might be CADASIL, which is a congenital stroke disorder, but it affected Nietzsche's vision, and his doctors were telling him he needed to, limit the amount of time he was reading and writing. Well, as an academic, you're doing that all the time. And so even though he would continue reading and writing at Sils Maria, that way, though, he could limit that amount of time to whatever extent, and then spend that time actually focusing on the stuff he wanted to read and stuff he wanted to write, rather than the obligations that he had as a result of his career, right? And so, I don't know. It's a minor thing, but I thought I'd point that out.
He got fed up with his fellow academics, gave up his job, and moved to Sils Maria in the Swiss Alps, where he lived quietly, working on his masterpieces, among them The Birth of Tragedy, Human All Too Human, The Gay Science, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Beyond Good and Evil, On the Genealogy of Morals. He had lots of problems. He didn't get on with his family. I don't like my mother, and it's painful even for me to hear my sister's voice. Women kept rejecting him. His books didn't sell. And
okay, women kept rejecting him. What is that based on? Is that just based on Luce Salome? Because that's just gossip. That's something she wrote about in I think 1920. Maybe it wasn't that late, but it was a long time. And during their letters when he was alive, it's never mentioned that that he had kind of any romantic feelings for her. Now maybe he did, but the story didn't crop up that he proposed to her or multiple times or any of that kind of stuff until well after Nietzsche was dead. So I don't know. It's kind of dubious. It's really just gossip. And so I'm wondering what they're based. They put it in plural too. So
him, his books didn't sell. And when he was only 44, he had a mental breakdown, precipitated when he saw a horse in a Turin.
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah, mental breakdown. I don't know if that's the right word. He basically had a sudden onset of dementia. A mental breakdown, a lot of people think of a midlife crisis, right? And then the Turin horse story. That comes from an Italian tabloid magazine that wrote about this event 11 years after it allegedly happened. It was the year Nietzsche died that it came out, but his collapse was 11 years before that in 1899. And so this tabloid article comes out in the year 1900. It's written anonymously. There's no like cited source as a witness who saw this. So it's anonymous hearsay published in a magazine that was known for sensationalist and tales and sort of like celebrity gossip and that sort of thing. And, also by the time it had been published, which he might have written it, I think, before Nietzsche's collapse. Yeah, he definitely did. But Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment, there's a scene where there's a very similar scene where a horse is being beaten, and I think it's like young Raskolnikov in his memories is like wants to go and like save the horse. And so that happened. The Piazza Carlo Alberto, there's a statue of like a military figure. I forget exactly who, but he's on horseback. He's holding up his sword. It kind of looks like from a certain angle or a certain perspective, you might be able to think, or you might think that was like a man raising something to beat a horse. So that sort of imagery might have been sort of associated with the square where Nietzsche had his collapse in Turin. But, it seems like these memes just got attached to Nietzsche's collapse, because at the time of his collapse, nothing in the letters of Overbeck, when he was communicating with Nietzsche's family, trying to find him medical treatment, where he eventually was transferred to the hospital at Jena. He doesn't mention anything about this story about Nietzsche seeing a horse being beaten by the driver and like hugging it or saying, "I understand you." But that's completely absent at the time of the incident. And the thing is, Nietzsche's landlord, Davide Fino, he noticed Nietzsche doing a bunch of weird things that he reported. Like he was like, yeah, he would dance naked in his room. He was shredding money and putting it in the waste bin. He took down all the paintings on the walls to make the room look more like a temple. He's like talking to himself late at night and stuff like that. But he doesn't say anything about this horse story. And so then again, it doesn't appear until anonymous hearsay like 11 years later. So to see that repeated here, in addition to the Salome story, I mean, they're both really common, but I'm tired of seeing it. It's such a shame that some of the three biggest things people know about Nietzsche, right? The Turin horse story, the Lou Salome rejection, and like some variation on he had syphilis. At least they haven't done the he had syphilis thing yet. But it's like there's like three big things about his life that are all myths. So it's a shame.
In street being beaten by its driver and ran over to embrace him, shouting, "I understand you." He never recovered and died 11 sad years later.
Oh, 11
but his philosophy
years.
was full of heroism and grandeur. He was a prophet of what he called Selbstüberwindung, or self-overcoming, the process by which a great-souled person, what he called an Ubermensch, rises above their circumstances and difficulties to embrace whatever life throws at them.
Yeah, no. So Ubermensch is not. The narrator seems to be using this as like as synonymous with like the higher man or the free spirit. Free spirit is kind of sounds like what he's describing. What does he say exactly? Right. Rises above their circumstances and difficulties to embrace. What did he say? Let me play it again.
An Ubermensch, but his philosophy was full of heroism and grandeur. He was a prophet of what he called Selbstüberwindung, or self-overcoming, the process by which a great-souled person, what he called an Ubermensch, rises above their circumstances.
Yeah, okay. So an Ubermensch is not just a great-souled person, right? It's not a person at all. The Overman ideal is infinitely beyond mankind. And thus spoke Zarathustra. There's nothing that Zarathustra says about here's how you become an Ubermensch. And my goal is for you to become Ubermensch, my followers. He never says that. What he says is that you should live in such a way to bring forth the Ubermensch. He says that you might be forefathers to the Ubermensch, or that it might be something that you could create. But yeah, he says you should live your life like an arrow of longing shot for the Overman. Like aim high, but then you'll go under. Untergehen. You will be. It's sort of like, how would I put it? Be willing to sacrifice and give away yourself in the name of some higher ideal, to be willing to create something beyond yourself and be willing to pay the price for that, whatever it might be. And that's going to require sacrifice and struggle and pain and stuff like that. That's not so he doesn't say this is how we're going to all become overmen. Nietzsche says live in such a way that you are basically worshiping the ideal of the overman, because the overman is supposed to replace God in Nietzsche's new philosophy. That's where all of our value is going to go towards. And what that means is all of our value in life, or all the value that we invest in life, what our goal in doing that is to live in such a way that we are bringing forth something greater. And that's our goal for mankind, is that mankind will give rise to something greater than itself. The great souled person, or the person who rises above their circumstances and difficulties, is just like a free spirit, or like a great man, or whatever. Nietzsche has a lot of different ways of talking about it, but they're not an Ubermensch, properly speaking. So that's a misunderstanding.
Circumstances and difficulties to embrace whatever life throws at them. He wanted his work to teach us, as he put it, how to become
Caspar
who
David
we
Friedrich,
really are.
Wanderer above the sea of
centers
thought.
around 4 main
Okay, here we go. Yeah, this is the part I remember.
1. Own up to envy. Envy is, Nietzsche recognized, a big part of life. Yet
I don't know that. Own up to envy. That's the first thing. I don't even recognize that. Okay, what does he say about it?
Yet the lingering effects of Christianity generally teach us to feel ashamed of our envious feelings. They seem an indication of evil.
Okay, we got Mark Zuckerberg and George Clooney. And who's this guy? Who's this guy on the left? I don't know who that is. Let me know in the comments who that is. So, wait. He's saying...
Yet the lingering effects of Christianity generally teach us to feel ashamed of our envious feelings. They seem an indication of evil, so we hide them from ourselves and others.
Okay, what? Okay,
Yet there's nothing wrong with envy, maintained Nietzsche, so long as we use it as a guide to what we really want. Every person who makes us envious should be seen as an indication. Okay, this is not... this makes me seriously question, actually, whether they've even read, even cracked the pages of a book by Nietzsche, because I have no idea what the fuck he's talking about here. Nietzsche says obviously he has the will to power idea, so all human action is based directly or indirectly on the will to power, or that's a constituent part of all human action, an essential constitutive part of all human action. And the way he writes about this in Human All Too Human, for example, before he's really formulated that idea, he talks a lot about vanity, or gaining advantage, or self-advantage, or he's drawing on La Rochefoucauld and the idea that self-love is the driver of all human behavior, even though we come up with all these sort of moral rationalizations for our behavior. Everyone's trying to advance themselves, and Nietzsche thinks you should look up to great individuals as a sort of model for your life, or an image, right, of what would you say? He says in the Untimely Meditations, a more genuinely human person. Later than that, he sort of he measures a great person by whether they can be a prefiguration of that which is to go beyond the limitations of humanity, right? But envy, that's actually just wrong, because envy is an other-directed feeling, right? So yeah, Nietzsche would agree, that if you think envy is a sin, that it's objectively wrong. Yeah, obviously Nietzsche's a relativist, or more properly a moral fictionalist. So he doesn't he doesn't think things are objectively wrong or deontologically wrong. And he wouldn't agree with Christianity that it is sinful or something like that. But envy that's necessarily an other directed form of morality. That's slave morality, right? I don't normally like to just dismiss things by saying that's slave morality, but in the context of what we're talking about here, this video is revealing a huge misunderstanding, that they don't understand that envy, the defining feature of slave morality, is that it's other directed, in that you are looking at and comparing yourself
he's complete, like the narrative is completely leaving out the power dynamic that shapes where the slave morality comes from, right? That's really the issue, is that where does that envy come from? Why would people be envious? In Nietzsche's view, it's because there's not an equal distribution of power in society. And so you have a large number of people who are disenfranchised. They do not have power over their own lives or destinies or power over others. In fact, power is exercised upon them. And then that makes them, envious and resentful of the ruling class, the nobility. But in Nietzsche's view, the nobility is not their defining feature is that they're self-directed, they're inner-directed, they're self-legislating. That's the way to put it. So, the noble valuations that Nietzsche praises and admires have nothing to do with being envious of other people. And he would actually say that that's actually rather, it's necessarily means that you are contrasting and comparing yourself with others and concerning yourself with what other people are doing and whether their successes, like evaluating whether they deserve their successes or whether you deserve it more. That is not at all what Nietzsche advocated for. And so if they're going to try and say that Nietzsche says envy is good and Christianity's big problem was that it got rid of envy, that's just not true.
Of what we could one day become. The envy-inducing writer, tycoon, or chef is hinting at who you are capable of.
Wait, okay. Warren, that's Warren Buffett, right? I don't know who that is. He says he's a chef. I don't know who that is either. Who is that? Again, let me know in the comments, I guess. But okay, again, Nietzsche does say we should look to, great individuals as a model. But like in Schopenhauer as educator, he specifically says the businessman is not my model for a great person. Like these people are solely concerned with economics and short-term pleasures and material gains, and he was just not he didn't think that I feel like this person is probably mixing Nietzsche with Rand. That's what's happening here. A lot of people do that because I don't think you could get this view that, because like an artist, yeah, like if you're like a writer, is a chef a kind of artist? I'm going to say no, actually. Like, really, that's just somebody who does a trade really, really well. There is an art to it, but like chefs are generally like they're businessmen selling a skill. And Nietzsche's view of a great person was never the person who's really successful selling a skill or like selling their labor, or someone who's really successful like making business decisions. Someone who does say that is Ayn Rand, but you can't get that out of Nietzsche unless you kind of consciously or unconsciously combine him with Rand, either because you've read both of them and you're kind of interpreting Nietzsche that way, or you're just kind of adopting the view of Nietzsche that's in the zeitgeist that for some reason conflates him with that kind of idea.
One day being.
It's not true.
It's not that Nietzsche believed we always end up getting what we want. His own life had taught him this well enough. He simply insisted that we must face up to our true desires, put up a heroic fight to honour them, and only then mourn failure with solemn dignity.
Okay.
That is what it means to be an Ubermensch.
Oh, no. I was about to be like, well, the ending was not too bad, and then he like fell down flat on his face. So, okay.
Don't be a Christian. Nietzsche had some...
This is the reason I think why this video, I remember being put off by it, because it reads very much like a thou shalt not list. And that's just not, yeah, Nietzsche was fundamentally opposed to Christianity. That's true. That's a big deal. People like Jordan Peterson like totally ignore that, or like try to obfuscate it. So it's a big deal to be like, yeah, Christianity is sort of central. It's weird. This should have been number one, not the weird envy thing that they made up. Like, I don't even know where that came from. But so that is important to emphasize. Let's just see what they say about it. But I'm saying I don't like the general style of this, of like Nietzsche. These are some commandments from Nietzsche. It's like, that's not really how you should present his philosophy, because it's not a bunch of universal, like moral, they did say they're suggestions, but I just don't, the way it's phrased and the presentation, I don't like it.
Extreme things to say about Christianity. In the entire New Testament, he wrote, there is only one person worth respecting, Pilate, the Roman governor. It was
based.
knockabout stuff, but his true target was
Whoa, it was knockabout stuff. What is that? What does that mean? British people in the comments, tell me what that means. Does that mean it's like not serious? Because this is a serious statement from Nietzsche. I mean, yeah, it's kind of funny, but he's being serious. So, and there's like a real philosophical idea beneath this, by the way. And if you want to know more about it, I guess you can like listen to the podcast. Again, this is a minor thing, but I just like even the offhand comments are like bullshit. So
more subtle and more interesting. He resented Christianity for protecting people from their envy.
what?
Christianity had, in Nietzsche's account, emerged in the late Roman Empire in the minds of timid slaves who'd lacked the stomach to get hold of what they really wanted, and so had clung to a philosophy that made a virtue of their cowardice. He called this Sklavenmoral. Christians, whom he rather rudely termed die Herde, the herd.
I just want to say, I don't understand why he's taking the time to give us the German for Sklavenmoral when it doesn't enhance our like understanding of the term at all. Because I mean, if you think about it, like, okay, there's some terms like Untergehen, like I mentioned, like going under, right? It's a really interesting term. It's the term you would use in German for when the sun goes down, or when a ship sinks, or for someone's downfall, and it has like all of those sort of connotations, right? And that's Zarathustra uses the word over and over and over again. There's like a whole Nietzsche loves to add over and under as prefixes to the words he uses to sort of change the meaning. Or you could talk about like Aufheben in German. It's not really a translatable term. Or you could talk about like Tapferkeit has like a really interesting meaning for Nietzsche. Or the one of the episodes we talked about recently, the rope dancer, right? The guy who walks out on the tightrope in Zarathustra's prologue. The actual meaning means like rope dancer. It's not just like a tightrope walker, as we would say in English. It has dancer in it, which gives you a different sort of connotation to the meaning. Sklavenmoral just means slave morality. So like, why are you including these German terms other than just to sound smart? And then it's like Christians. He termed the herd. I mean, yeah, but I mean, Christians are the herd, but the herd is not just Christians. Like,
whom he rather rudely termed die Herde, the herd, had wished to enjoy the real.
You know what it is? It's that maybe if you say Christian in like a broad, extended sense, right? Like the essence of Christianity. But his whole description of Christianity in here, the way that he just did it, actually, I kind of let it pass, but what is it that Christianity protected people from their envy? Okay, no, right? Christianity's main problem for Nietzsche has nothing to do with envy. I don't get this envy thing he's talking about. It has to do with pity. Pity is the central problem with the Christian metaphysics and morality. And in fact, envy and pity are like two sides of the same coin. If you think about it, like you're in your position in the hierarchy, somewhere in the middle of it, right? And you look up at the people above you in the hierarchy and you're envious of if you're other directed with your morality and your outlook, you look up at the people above you and you're envious of them for having what you don't have. And you look down at the people below you and you're pitiful, or you're pitying towards them because they have it worse off than you. They're two sides of the same coin. And so I just don't like, he's completely misrepresenting what Nietzsche's critique of Christianity is. He's completely missed the point.
Whom he rather rudely termed die Herde, the herd, had wished to enjoy the real ingredients of fulfillment, a position in the world.
And the herd is anyone with herd morality, which goes well beyond Christianity. I mean, yeah, we inherit a form of it in the form of Christianity in the West, but that could be like, Nietzsche would say there's herd morality in like every single society that's ever existed on Earth. So, we can use the metaphor of like what is Christian to talk about certain tendencies in the Western mind, but he would apply this to like everywhere. Okay, so the herd. Okay, what is he saying now? What bullshit
Christians,
is he saying now?
whom he rather rudely termed die Herde, the herd, had wished to enjoy the real ingredients of fulfillment, a position in the world, sex, intellectual mastery, creativity, but they'd been too inept to get them.
What?
They therefore fashioned a hypocritical creed, denouncing what they wanted but were too weak to fight for, while praising what they didn't want but happened to.
Wait a minute. Okay. No. What are the things they list? Like sex and like being able to pursue the arts and like material success or whatever? That's not what Nietzsche talked about. Again, he talked about a fundamental power dynamic, a power relationship between the nobility in society and the common people, the masses in society. There was never a time where the masses in society couldn't get sex. Like, what does that mean? People, I really wonder what the fuck he means by that. Like, most people, um, throughout history, it's like you were like get to a certain age, like in your late teens, you get married off, usually by your family. And that's that, right? I mean, like, yeah, I know that, like, especially the further you proceed into the nobility, the more promiscuity there is, the more that you have the privilege to sort of engage in. And there's always been people having affairs, doing all that kind of thing. But like our norms today of like having serial monogamy and like, people like in like medieval Europe, if you were like sort of a extra kid on the farm, right? You just like you ended up given to the church or going into the military. Like if you couldn't inherit enough land to make anything of yourself and you weren't succeeding in life, like they just had like means of kind of like recycling people and stuff like that. But like, what is he saying? Like the slave morality was all incels? Like that's not what Nietzsche says at all. And again, he's kind of using like, oh, fulfillment, a position in the world. Like he's talking about it like we're talking about modern times. Like we're talking about people trying to get material advancement or get the promotion at work or get a girlfriend, right? That's not what Nietzsche was talking about at all. He was literally talking about being part of a caste in society where you have no power and power is imposed upon you from without, and how that creates feelings of resentment due to your own impotence and your inability to requite harm with harm and inability to feel your power in any way. And so you imagine, like revenge in the form of like hell or the apocalypse or, whatever it might be. Um, yeah, I like, I don't
Ingredients
know.
of fulfillment, a position.
It's also not okay. Hold on. And before moving on, that's not why Christians have the value of chastity, because they like couldn't have sex, right? It's because the body, every embodied good became sinful. Because if the slave morality comes from people who are physically weak and people who held to the master morality were physically strong, or they had power in a physical sense in the world, right? We're talking about physical force. Even if we're talking about force of law, you have the physical force of the military behind your law, right? These are the people who control the very real levers of power that actually manifest practical ability to impose your will in the real world. And they were, for a matter of fact, people who were like celebrated physical fitness and beauty and passion and sexuality and all those things. So those became sinful because those were the value system of the harmful master. So again, they're completely ignoring this power dynamic and acting like, well, it was just people who couldn't get sex, so they made chastity a virtue. It's like, what? No, that's not what Nietzsche writes at all. He says that they basically made the flesh sinful. They made the whole body sinful, and therefore seeking after bodily pleasures became sinful. So,
In
yeah,
the
let's
world,
not go over
sex,
that again.
intellectual mastery, creativity, but they'd been too inept to get them. They therefore fashioned a hypocritical creed, denouncing what they wanted but were too weak to fight for, while
There's
praising
tits
what they
in
didn't
this.
want but happened to
That's
have. So, in the Christian value system, sexlessness turned into purity, weakness became
wow.
goodness, submission to people one hates became obedience, and, in Nietzsche's phrase, not being able to take revenge turned into forgiveness. Christianity amounted to a giant machine for bitter denial.
That's like, okay, there's half truths in here, right? But it's not
Into
okay.
forgiveness. Christianity amounted to a giant machine for.
Okay. So again, it's not sexlessness that we get like chastity or purity. That comes from a general reviling of the body. Weakness is goodness. Yeah, the good man's the harmless man, right? submission to people one hates is obedience. Yeah, but that's not really like, okay. In Christianity, for example, that the real important thing is obedience to God. The fact that they say like render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's isn't really, it's not like like, yeah, it's virtuous to obey God when he tells you to do that, but it's not like it's a good thing just to submit to authority in Christianity. Like they actually celebrate rebelling against, or like, you know, refusing to comply with like authorities they consider evil. That happens among Christians all the time. So, um, and yeah, not being able to take revenge, forgiveness, I guess so. But again, Nietzsche thinks that they did take revenge in their imagination in the form of like hell and stuff like that. So he doesn't really even think that forgiveness is their real value. I mean, I guess this guy kind of said that. He said he said their creed is hypocritical. So he gets that element of it, I guess, but he doesn't he doesn't bring up the critique of pity anywhere in this, and he doesn't bring up the master and slave morality at all. So it leaves you with a really impoverished understanding of like what he's talking about here.
For bitter denial. 3. Never drink alcohol. Nietzsche himself drank only water, and as a special treat,
Yes,
milk. And he thought
true.
we should do likewise. He wasn't making a small, eccentric dietary point. The idea went to the heart of his philosophy, as contained in his declaration, there have been 2 great narcotics in European civilization, Christianity and alcohol. He hated alcohol for the...
And just a side point, not really have to do with the video. I mean, like Christianity and alcohol just like go naturally together, right? Because wine is part of the sacrament, you know, the communion ritual. And I remember I was in Munich at one point, like on the tour I was taking, like a walking tour. The guy was explaining about the monks during the time of fasting. You know, they were still allowed to drink beer, and the beer back then didn't get you as hammered, but it would have lots of sediment in there. It'd be really heavy, thick beer, so you could kind of like feel full. And so the monks drank so much of it that it actually started getting them drunk, even though it was like a really low alcohol by volume, to where they were like drinking like gallons of beer a day and stumbling around the monastery drunk. And the Pope had to like limit how much alcohol they could actually like have during fasting time, because they're also not eating anything, right? So yeah, this is all true. Nietzsche. An important point is that Nietzsche himself, though, because he had a chronic condition that caused him a lot of pain, he like took painkillers. So he wasn't above doing that. I mean, it's just worth noting. I mean, we can maybe give him a pass because he was like in excruciating pain, but you know.
very same reasons that he scorned Christianity, because both numb pain, both reassure us that things are just fine as they are, sapping us of the will to change our lives for the better. A few drinks usher in a transient feeling of satisfaction that can get fatally in the way of taking the steps necessary to improve our lives. Nietzsche was obsessed with the awkward truth that getting really valuable things done hurts. How little you know of human happiness, you comfortable people, he wrote. The secret of a fulfilled life is live dangerously, build your cities on the slopes of Mount Vesuvius. 4. God is dead.
I kind of hated his performance of that line just now, or his reading. It sounded like he was being like mocking it almost. Like, and I wonder, it's like, because I really think this guy's never read Nietzsche, so it's like, can you really take him seriously and really understand like this passage in context, or is it just kind of like some pretty words that sound cool?
Your cities on the slopes of Mount Vesuvius. 4. God is dead. Nietzsche's dramatic assertion that God is dead is not, as it's often taken to be, some kind of a celebratory statement.
Okay, so wow, look at the date when this came out again, October 10th, 2014, and we still have Jordan Peterson around 8 years later saying basically the exact same thing. Like, a lot of people, you probably heard this is a celebratory statement. It's commonly said that it is, but actually it isn't. It's like everyone knows that. People have been saying that before this video came out, but like, look, 8 years ago, and they're saying the same thing. Everyone thinks that's like some super clever point. The problem is, it's like, okay, yeah, Nietzsche's not like clapping for the death of God, like some new atheist, like chuckle fuck, like clapping like a seal about, dancing around on God's grave or something. They always present it like this, like ridiculous binary where it's like, was it the most sorrowful, lamentable tragedy of all that Nietzsche thought was this horrific thing, or was he like a chuckling new atheist, ironic asshole who thought it was great? And it's like, if you've read Nietzsche ever, you wouldn't think that he would fall into either one of those like simple-minded positions. And if you actually read what he wrote in the Gay Science Book 5, What Our Cheerfulness Signifies, the first aphorism of Book 5, he makes it very clear. He says, the most recent news that the old God is dead, it hasn't reached the ears of the masses in Europe, but for us free spirits and philosophers of the future, the news that the old God is dead is it fills our hearts with gratitude, presentiment, expectations, and it's a danger and an opportunity. It's like a wide open sea, and never did such an open sea of possibilities ever exist, right? So, let's see what else he says here.
Despite his reservations about Christianity, Nietzsche didn't think that the end of belief was anything to cheer about. Religious beliefs were false, he knew, but he observed that they were very, very beneficial in the sense of helping us cope with the problems of life.
Wow.
Nietzsche...
I know cope wasn't like a slang back then, but he just called Nietzsche's philosophy a cope, right? Because if Nietzsche is trying to replace Christianity, if he thinks that these beliefs were beneficial because they help us cope, that's basically what they're saying. Like he just said in the alcohol segment that Nietzsche doesn't believe we should use like things to like kill the pain just to cope to get by, but then he's like reducing Nietzsche's beliefs to like a cope, or like things that we need his to replace the cope of Christianity. Whereas Nietzsche actually believed Christianity gave us way more than like helping us quote unquote cope with reality. It gave us a whole like metaphysics and morality, like a goal for our lives, and gave like meaning to our lives, and that's like an important thing that goes beyond just like alleviating suffering, right? You're putting it back into the language of alleviating suffering, whether this person knows it or not, that's what they're
beneficial
doing.
In the sense of helping us cope with the problems of life. Nietzsche felt that the gap left by religion should ideally be filled by culture. He meant philosophy, art, music, literature. Culture should replace scripture.
Okay, so during his middle period, that was kind of true. This is such an oversimplified way of putting it, man. I don't know why this bothers me so much, because it's like it's like statements like this where I'm like, okay, that's not like entirely false. It's just that it's so oversimplified that it's basically wrong. And why would you even bring up this aspect of his philosophy if you can't take the time to do it justice? And I guess it's like this video is 6 minutes and 56 seconds, and I'm like here rambling on. So, but then it's just like, why talk about something else? Present his ideas in some other way if you can't do it right. So, like, initially, that's not what Nietzsche says. Initially, he says it's only through aesthetics that life can be eternally justified. He then goes to culture in his middle period. In his later period, he thinks scripture should replace scripture, right? I mean, he wrote Thus Spoke Zarathustra in the style of the Bible in order to give us a new affirmative philosophy for finding meaning in life. And basically, the answer there is to live. It's the overman as the justification for your life. Or, you could talk about amor fati or the eternal recurrence. All of these ideas that are actually, pretty famous ideas from Nietzsche's that you could have brought up instead. But see, he's already like misrepresented the overman. If the overman is something you're supposed to like become, and that's like what he thinks that is, then he really would not understand that that's like this thing that's supposed to be infinitely above you, justifying your life, right? In culture, it's funny because that is sort of the same way. And this is my problem with it too, because yeah, so there is a middle period where Nietzsche explores culture as the answer to this. But what culture is, I mean, he's just like, well, philosophy, art, music, literature. Those are the productions of culture. But what culture itself is not any one of those things. What culture is, and we've talked about this somewhat on the podcast, but what Nietzsche writes is that culture is it's a thing that consecrates the individual to the impersonal within their society. What is the impersonal? Well, it's all that in the human condition, which is not personal and subjective. So things like universal human mortality, or things like that, coming of age, like all these things that are just parts of the human condition, challenges everyone deals with, problems that we all have to face. And how do you answer those problems? And what a culture is it's a valuation, which is a form of, like, you could call it like an answer to that question, but more properly, it's like a set of first principles for answering it, to appeal to in order to answer it. What does Nietzsche say about valuations? He says, behind logic and its sovereignty of movement, or seeming sovereignty of movement, there stand valuations, physiological demands for the preservation of a certain way of life. Meaning that beneath every society or culture, you have this constellation of value judgments, which are pre-rational, right? They emerge physiologically. And it's these that sort of form up the foundation of what a culture is. And they provide a sort of shared net of consciousness. It's like a concept he brings up in The Gay Science, the aphorism genius of the species, that consciousness is only useful as a net of communication between human beings. And those series of value judgments where everyone is all on the same page, everyone has been consecrated to the same impersonal truth, gives everyone a collective net or collective frame for approaching and understanding the world. And not even that, that's really too modern way to look at it. It's like, it's practical, right? It's like the practical way that our identity as a society or culture manifests in the world. And maybe that's all, like, sounds like a little too abstract, but it's all just to say, like, it's not like Nietzsche thought we could, like, we'll get people to look at pretty pictures and listen to music and that'll, like, replace what the Bible did for us. When he was talking about culture, I mean, the way he says it is, again, it's what develops into the Overman idea, because he says that we're all like, we should look at ourselves and say to ourselves that nature failed. She succeeded badly in creating us, right? Or she failed beautifully. I forget how he puts it, but that we're all things with great potential, but we still have these, like, human limitations, and we should always be aware that there's something that ways that our human potential for greatness has not yet been realized, and we need to form an image of an ideal person above ourselves in order to help elevate us and bring us out of, like, the world of blind willing that's, like, no different from any of the other animals into something that's like a more genuinely human being. That's what he means when he says culture. So it just, like, I don't know, like, did he say anything, like, wrong? No, I mean, he didn't really. I mean, he's representing an idea Nietzsche's having in, like, his untimely meditations period, as if it's like Nietzsche's position, which it's not. But even the way he represents it, it's just like, it leaves so much to be desired. And why not just, like, talk about a concept that's actually from Nietzsche, or, like, what would be a better way to say it? Like, why not appeal to the eternal return, or the Overman, or the Amor Fati idea, or something like that, rather than, like, going for the culture thing when there's so much to explain there and you're trying to do a 6-minute video. And I think it's because he doesn't really get it. Like, he doesn't really understand all that stuff.
However, Nietzsche was deeply suspicious of the way his own era was handling culture. He believed the universities were killing the humanities, turning them into dry academic exercises, rather than using them for what they were always meant to be, guides to life. He admired the way the Greeks had used tragic drama in a practical, therapeutic way, as an occasion for catharsis.
I mean, that's true. I don't like the word therapeutic, but
and moral education, and wished his own age to be comparably ambitious. He called for a reformation in which people, newly conscious of the crisis brought on by the end of faith, would fill the gaps created by the disappearance of...
Okay, so we got Sigmund Freud, it looks like, and Shakespeare, and is that, like, Pavarotti, or what was his name? I hate this image. I hate this whole thing he's trying to say here. That, like, because what does it imply? It's like, okay, we're all going to sit at the pews of, like, the great artist will be the new preacher, and we'll just kind of, like, we'll look up to them for how we should live our lives. Like, that's our new faith. Like, that's not what Nietzsche was saying at all. And so it's just like that, like, who came up with this? I don't know. I don't like it. I really dislike this video now.
Religion with philosophy and art. Every era faces particular psychological challenges, thought Nietzsche, and it's the task of the philosopher to identify and help solve these. For Nietzsche,
Wow, it's like you just made the philosopher into like a the philosopher's job is to like solve the problems the common people are having. It's like a utilitarian understanding of the philosopher. Okay.
Task of the philosopher to identify and help solve these. For Nietzsche, the 19th century was reeling under the impact of two developments: mass democracy and atheism.
Okay, I was about to say, like, what are they doing? Why are they? Wait, who is this popping up here? Uh, Showing obviously not. He was like the 19th century, and it's like, what is this? The 70s? Like, what is this? But
Developments:
it's okay,
mass
mass
democracy
democracy. Okay.
and atheism. The first threatened to unleash
It's
torrents of
Richard Dawkins.
undigested envy, the second to leave humans without guidance or morality. In relation to both challenges,
Oh fuck.
Nietzsche remains our endearing, fascinating, often lovable, and mustachioed guide.
All right. Well, I hate this. Um, this video has 5 fucking million views and 7.6 million subscribers. And I'm not. I want to point out, I'm not being envious, even though this like, see, that's the funny thing. Just saying that, I'm like, there's people who are gonna call me like resentful, and it made me like realize again where I'm like, yeah, that's like, it sounds like you're being envious, which is like really similar to being resentful. And like they basically just completely inverted the meaning of like Nietzsche's whole philosophy. So really shockingly bad video, but it's not because I wish um I had 5 million views. I mean, it would be nice. Like, I don't really care. But as you can see, I disliked it here, which I know doesn't matter at all. But that's like my protest, my little form of protest here, because like that's unacceptable, man. The fact that like this complete bullshit has like one of like this many views. You know, like I've said often, I'm like, oh man, Jordan Peterson's like a big problem for distorting Nietzsche and the popular consciousness. But like, how much damage did this one video do? I wonder. But anyway, all right, it's Essential Salts signing off.